Imagine if you could time travel 3,000 years into the past and capture a snapshot of a single day, rather than decades and centuries all blurred into one. In an archaeological sense, in Britain, evidence like that is exceptionally rare. Now, most of what we uncover is long-term evidence of living. Objects broken, reused, lost, discarded, entering the ground in layers below us. Now, archaeologists use that material to piece together how people lived their lives. Now, that works, but rarely does it give you a snapshot of life as it was being lived. A bit like Pompeii. Okay, have a look at this. Right, we're on Google Maps and we're zooming right in just to the east of Peterborough, somewhere beneath this really ordinary river landscape. Right here next to this bridge, something extraordinary happened. Archaeologists uncovered a Bronze Age settlement some 3,000 years old, where the contents of homes were still present and together, sitting where they'd last been used and left behind, exact spot when life there just stopped. This is a quiet river on flat ground, and you'd not give this place a second glance even now, but about 3,000 years ago people built their houses out over this water. It was a practical decision based in a working landscape shaped by a river, and for a very long time it worked exactly as intended. And then suddenly it didn't. What makes this so extraordinary is the way the settlement ended and how it allowed archaeologists to see something that they almost never get to see in Britain. Daily life captured together like this. No gaps, life in one snapshot, and that's why this has become known as Britain's Pompeii. Now, to tell this story today, we need at least 3 versions of me. Indoor research pool. Outdoor pool, of course, from a landscape just down there, which I feel like replicates what this would have looked like back at the time. An indoor pool who's going to pretend he's actually at site and didn't ask somebody to film all this beautiful overlay. Yeah. Okay, let's get into this. I think we're going to need these. Okay, to understand why this settlement existed in the first place, we need to start with the river. In the Bronze Age, this behaved differently to how it does now. It was slower and wider in places, and probably many different routes, closely tied to the surrounding wetland, creating conditions that shaped where people could build and how they lived. People were familiar with that behaviour. They really understood how the water moved through the landscape. They built houses on raised platforms, piles driven into the ground, and that reflects that perfectly. Elevating these structures kept living spaces well above wet ground and seasonal flooding, while still placing homes close to water-based resources. They were intended to be durable, not necessarily temporary. So here, life was very much organised around the river: transport, food, materials, trade, and it worked really well for them as a whole, with here in this direct environment, and of course with the wider landscape too. Now today that logic is hard to see if we just stand here and look outwards. We have drainage, straightened channels and modern use, all altering how the river behaves. But now when the archaeologists sort of reconstructed the earlier river models, chapter 2 here in the volume 1 is key. Well, then all of a sudden it becomes much easier to understand some of the reconstructions here make perfect sense for the placement of those settlements in that landscape. So here is the key for me. That location worked perfectly for those people, that community, really well for a very long time. But then one day it just didn't. And that very same landscape that supported that daily life, well, that would tell us exactly what that daily life looked like and what survived thereafter. So that place worked for a good while at least, and then it just didn't. Now at some point a fire took hold in this settlement. We don't know exactly why, the evidence doesn't give us that, but what is clear, really clear, is that this wasn't a slow ending. It was sudden and dramatic. Okay, now here's the part I kind of love, because when archaeologists came here they weren't looking for anything extraordinary, anything exceptional, because this was a commercial job. The quarry was going to be sort of placed where we see it there now. Have a look at that. And prior to that, well, commercial archaeology had to be done. This was just another job until it wasn't. Now when the excavation opened up, it was pretty obvious they were dealing with something really rare here. Everything had been left exactly as it was. Nothing had been tidied away. This place wasn't abandoned. The contents of their homes are still together because they stopped functioning immediately. And that's it. That's the moment when everybody on site realises this isn't just an ordinary archaeological dig. This is something special. You know, looking at the site now, it's hard to picture that day. There's nothing dramatic about this landscape at all. I love this image. Now there's a lot of images like this in in this report, but this one specifically tells us what types of wood were used as the piles to support the settlement itself. Hugely important. Now, when this failed, completely failed, well, it fell within to the wetland and the silts that had previously supported it, and that's where this whole story turns completely. Now, settlements burn all the time in archaeology. Fire alone doesn't make this place unusual. What matters is what happened immediately after the fire, the way the landscape worked and the way everything came to rest together. Because it set up something genuinely rare in archaeology, preservation that almost never survives on this scale in Britain. Now, this is the bit where archaeology can't normally give us an amazing picture. It's all about inference. We have layers which can tell us a lot, but again, we're reliant on sort of putting pieces of the puzzle together. And when there's a fire, well, things get scattered, things get cleared, and things often rot away. So what's left is often mixed up. It's a layer, and it's often hard to read. It's a useful layer, and it can give us a lot of context, but often it's just a layer. But here, the landscape stepped in to help. When those houses failed and they dropped into the waterlogged silt with slow moving water in the river channel, well, oxygen was cut off quickly, decay slowed right down, and crucially, objects stayed exactly where they fell. Now, when archaeologists started excavating this site, they weren't just sort of picking up the timbers and the floorboards, they were picking up and recording the details of everything associated with daily life, thousands upon thousands of items. Pots grouped together, tools lying close to where they had been used, structural elements still aligned. Again, this is another key for me because we're not guessing at any point of this excavation. There aren't any gaps whatsoever. Every single detail about life here is recorded exactly when it finished. They can trace activity areas, storage, work zones and movement within the house because the relationship between objects was still there. Now, all of a sudden from this we can now ask some really revealing questions. What exactly was Bronze Age life like, certainly here in this environment? And perhaps more importantly, what about Bronze Age Britain have we missed before? What exactly have we learned? It's all well and good to say we have Britain's Pompeii, we have a snapshot of life right here, but what exactly have we learned? This for me is where it gets really important, on more of a generic layer. Archaeologists started peeling this apart and they saw a house with working spaces, floors that made sense, items grouped together in ways that reflected use. Cooking equipment exactly where you would expect to find it. You had various containers holding different materials and you had tools in sort of set activity areas rather than sort of being clustered around anywhere they lay. You start to see how the house functioned, where food was prepared, where things were stored. This is where work happened, and those patterns repeat across the entire settlement. That tells us something really important. This wasn't one household improvising. This was an entire community of houses all working in the same way, all with a shared understanding of how a domestic space should be worked. Okay, and then we've got these, all sorts of materials and aspects of life that would never normally survive on a dry site. Bowls, troughs, buckets, containers, vessels. Now, we're used to seeing stone and worked material like that survive for obvious reasons. We don't normally see what we see at Must Farm, especially in one snapshot of life. We're seeing much more organic material. We're seeing how they actually used and continue to use wood materials, shaping their daily life with it, and fibres too. All sorts of organic materials left exactly where they were. Now, for me, the Bronze Age has always been a bit of a cultural desert. I know very little about it. Now, in learning what I've learned today and telling you and sharing that with you as well, well, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff about this period of time. I'm going to urge you to click on the links below. Some of the documents are like 1,300 pages long, so there's a bit of reading to do, but nevertheless, it's all fascinating and opens up a whole new era for me. Nothing at Must Farm is exceptional because it's rare or exotic. It's exceptional because it's really ordinary. There are normal homes here doing normal things caught intact. Must Farm tells us how people live via all the bits we usually don't get to see. So every other archaeological site now sort of feels incomplete compared to this one. It feels like now that we're never going to see the likes of this again, but that sounds negative, so let's flip that to archaeology now has filled in a whole bunch of gaps about the Bronze Age, the mundanities of life that people live through every day. I've been Paul, really appreciate you watching this, and I'm going to bang on for a little bit the fact that we have a new merch shop. You can go and click on the good links below, all sorts of weird and wonderful goodies. Click on that link and we'll see you this time next week.